Greetings, dear friends. I've got a video to recommend to you. Not this one. Is government the new God? Of course, that's absurd, but maybe in some people's minds it is. You know, John C. Lilly wrote a wonderful book called Simulations of God. How people have this concept that all these things are actually, so important that they actually become like a God. But of course, they're not the real God. I mean, it's absurd. But check out Film Threat. That's a great channel if you like unusual films. And this is a 2-hour documentary on J.R. Bob Dobbs and the Church of the SubGenius. I haven't watched this one yet, but I'm getting ready to. And it should be fascinating. But what I want to really show you is the actual film itself. And the way to watch it, the only way to watch it is on Tubi. I tried to get the DVD. I looked on all the other sources, Netflix or YouTube. You can't watch this movie anywhere but Tubi. And Tubi's free. So download that app and check out Tubi. They got a lot of old, funny videos, movies, whatnot. But this is a film to type in J.R. Bob Dobbs and the Church of the SubGenius. Or if you just type in Church of the SubGenius, you'll get the movie. It's about an hour and 20-minute documentary. And basically, it's going to tell you what the Church of the SubGenius is. And, well, I was watching the film earlier today and finishing up. And I'm going to put it on pause right here and then finish the video and tell you what it's all about. This is a movie, really, this documentary, The Church of the SubGenius, that I think is important. More than a lot of documentaries out there, to be honest. And here's why. It has a lot of correlation to the world at large today. It makes very bold statements about how we're living our lives, why many of our lives are not satisfying, unfulfilled, or full of stress and worry and fear and anger sometimes, and disconnect, maybe not necessarily with other people, although that certainly could apply, but a disconnect from the government today, the institutions at large, whether it's churches, religion, the medical establishment system, the military-industrial complex, the politics of the world, gay, sex, transgender, just you name it across the board. There are issues that people have controversial ideas and views about, or very strong views about, that are in opposition to other people's views. And it creates stress and conflict in the world. What the Church of the SubGenius is, essentially, was a joke that started back in 1978 by a couple of guys. And they never really intended it to be anything big. It was just kind of a thing they did. They were clipping out things, starting a little newsletter, a little chain. But it was about a reaction to this normalcy in the world, how we're so conditioned and programmed to accept so many things in the world that are fundamentally not even valid or true or accurate. And yet we're taught this in our institutions by our parents, who didn't know any better, of course, because they were taught by their parents, who taught by their parents. And we're taught by schools many things that are absolutely not important or not even really true, and culture at large. And religion, for sure, has taught a lot of things to people that are fundamentally unproven and very likely untrue, in my opinion. And yet people subscribe to these with blind faith. Great band, by the way. And so you take the Church of the SubGenius, it started growing. They realized they had tapped into a nerve out there in culture. This started in the United States, but it actually went even further than the United States. But this is where it primarily got going. And so they resonated with a lot of people out there who had similar feelings. Like in the movie Network, when the broadcaster Howard Beale goes on the air and says, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." A lot of people identified with that because they were mad. They were mad about things we were told were true, really aren't true. The endless lies, the barrage of slime spewing out of the television tube that Frank Zappa famously characterized in his song, "I Am the Slime." It's just slime pouring out of that TV. It's the tool of government and industry to regulate and manipulate you. The Church of the SubGenius was basically about a counter to that, saying, look, we see through the lies and the hypocrisy, the phoniness of it all, and we're going to expose it, and we're going to start living our lives thinking for ourselves, living our own lives the way we want to live it, not the way you're telling us we have to live it to be normal. And what is normal anyway? I've heard that expression many times. "Oh, Ben, you're not normal." Yeah, who wants to be normal? Really? My first given name is Norman. Norman. which is very different from normal, but it sounds similar. And I've never wanted to be Norman or normal. That's why I've always used my middle name, Benjamin. And so anyway, the Church of the SubGenius is just hilarious. It is a joke. It pokes fun of not only religion, but basically this conspiracy that is referred to as the conspiracy. You know, the term conspiracy nut or conspiracy idiot or whatever, that was coined by the CIA back in the 60s after people started questioning the assassination of JFK, that maybe there was more to it than just a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald. Yeah, there was a lot more to it. If you don't believe that, just check out the latest film by Oliver Stone, JFK Revisited, Through the Looking Glass. I mean, there are many, many documentaries, films, and endless books, I mean, numerous books on the subject that will definitely open your eyes to the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald did not assassinate John F. Kennedy. This was the conspiracy of all conspiracies. Of course, conspiracies have been occurring since there have been humans around controlling other humans. Thousands and thousands of years back, there have been plots and conspiracies and control and secret societies and all this sort of thing. That's pretty well known nowadays. However, the conspiracy nut idea, conspiracy theories and all that, that term was drummed up by the CIA to discredit anybody who's actually looking into the truth and questions the official narrative, the news media narrative that's largely spun out through government and uses the news agencies to put this information, or disinformation is more accurate, out there into the public. And so the Church of the SubGenius played a very key role for me. I've never sent dues to them or joined them or felt like I was a member of the cult. And it was a phony cult. And this is the whole thing you have to understand. People have it in their minds, a lot of people out there that know a little bit about it, they think it was a real cult, that it was dangerous, that they were promoting violence. Folks, nothing could be further from the truth. The people who started this whole thing going were very peaceful, loving people, kind-hearted, and very, very funny people, very witty, charming people. So that's why I encourage you to check out this documentary on Tubi. It's free. It'll really open your eyes to a lot of things in the world that are going on today. It takes us from the origin of the Church of the SubGenius and its so-called deity, J.R. Bob Dobbs, who's just a fictional, made-up guy who looks sort of like a guy you would see on television giving you the news for the day or selling you a product. And basically, it takes you from that period all the way through their ups and downs, how the thing just took off and was more successful than they ever dreamed. They even had a prediction that the world was going to end on a specific date. They never thought really realistically that that the thing would still be going when this date came, because it was 15 years into the future. You know, they figured the whole thing had be gone and over by then. But no, it was still going strong because so many people actually got their message that it is cool to start thinking for yourself, not just be a drone out there believing everything you see on television or that you hear in the culture. Start actually doing a little bit of your own research. While they didn't actually promote spirituality ever per se, I believe that was very open-ended for anyone to interpret. If you believe that real spirituality, which I am certainly a believer in that right now as a way to live life through spirituality, that was very open in the Church of the SubGenius, very much in the way that believing in a deity is left open to you in Buddhism. Buddhism, it never proclaims that there is no God. It just doesn't promote God. It's not about worshiping a deity per se. But there is certainly an allowance for that within the construct of Buddhism, and same with the Church of the SubGenius. If you wanted to be a religious follower or a spiritual person, more power to you, more power to you. Live your life fundamentally on your own terms and what works for you and resonates for you and is true for you. Because we all have our own personal truths. And then there are absolute truths, and they're not necessarily the same. In fact, most of the time, they're not the same. The Church of the SubGenius documentary there on Tubi that I'm promoting today, it takes you all the way through the timeline into the 1998 shootings at Columbine in Colorado, very close to where I live right now. And then it takes you to 9/11 and the events after that, and how it took us into the age of Trump. And you can see how there's a parallel between the Church of the SubGenius and how the world has actually changed and morphed, very similar to the ideas they were promoting all along. And not about chaos and anarchy necessarily, but within the constraints of your own life, as long as you are not hurting anyone else. And they never advocated hurting anyone in any way, anytime, ever. Be very clear about that. There was a lot of disinformation and misinformation in the media about the Church of the SubGenius at times. Some of it was actually promoted by some of their own members that wanted there to be a backlash against it. And so they got on and proclaimed things about how evil it was and destructive. And that wasn't so cool. You know, even the original founders were a little dismayed about that, but they felt, well, you know, we did promote the idea of people doing their own thing, but they did carry that a little bit too far. And there was a backlash, and, you know, there was definitely a little bit of a price to pay. But there are the books out there that I bought many years ago, the 2 volumes of the Church of the SubGenius and Revelation, J.R. Bob Dobbs. And there are a few other odd books out there, but they're very hard to come by. They're very expensive online. It has sort of died out, more or less. It's not really a big thing per se today anymore. It never was a big thing, as they say in the film. It was always sort of a cult thing, but, you know, I love cult films. Cult has different meanings to different people. When you think of a cult, you normally think of something very negative. A fanatical, religious, so-called religious group that wants people to do destructive things or drink Kool-Aid and kill themselves or ascend to a spaceship and this kind of thing. Of course, they made fun of all that in the Church of the SubGenius. They poked fun at cults themselves. They poked fun at big religion. They poked fun at government, the idea of conspiracies and brainwashing and all of it. It's all been in the Church of the SubGenius all along. And a lot of this has just been coming to light here in the last, I would say, few years or decade at best. So a good way to educate yourself and get some bearing and some basic way of viewing things with perspective is to spend an hour and 20 minutes and watch this film, The Church of the SubGenius. You will learn a lot, not only about the church itself, and it's very humorous at times, but you'll also learn, I think, a little bit about how we're looking at things in the world today in light of all the circumstances with lockdowns and vaccines and all this going on today, pandemics. And for me, it was just a real eye-opener. I know I'll watch this film again. I can't wait to watch the YouTube 2-hour little roundtable discussion and hear what they have to say. And Ivan Stang and others, the founding members, are involved in that, of course. So that's my high recommendation today for movies. There are a lot of good ones playing at the theater right now. I plan to go see a couple more today, The Power of the Dog, and be one of them. But for free, you can't beat this film on Tubi. Check out The Church of the SubGenius. And don't be normal. Think for yourself.